A very good morning and thank you so much for joining us on NBS Morning Breeze. It is a topical discussion and it is a very interesting conversation that we are delving into this morning. We have just concluded the elections. It's what most of us call a post-election. But within that season, we had grudges, political grudges, even in the communities where we come from. But so did our politicians and so did our political parties. At a moment where the country needs to unite, well, these conversations must happen in terms of what the true cost is for political grudges. And we ask what that is on governance, what that is on business and investment. What is the true cost of these political grudges on our business, on our investments, and of course, on us as a people? On this particular conversation this morning, I'm joined by Dr. Tash Rwengabo, who joins us now. He is a political scientist and a governance consultant to just shed light onto what we have now as a conversation. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, our viewers.
Yes. So the conversation on post-election reconciliation, some people might be asking, reconcile from what? But for someone that has observed us throughout the season and even now as we try to navigate the post-election situation, what truly are we contending with as a country, and why is reconciliation a big part of what we should be addressing right now?
Thank you very much, Tracy. Good morning to our viewers. First and foremost, an election is a contest. A contest for representative mandate and executive power. In an election, people incur costs, financial costs, social costs, psychological and energy costs, but also especially investments in terms of tactical and I think strategic compromises. You promise your spouse who disagrees that you go into elections, that you are going to win, and you assure him or her that the ground is soft for you. Then you get there and get surprised. You lose. Then the spouse says, wait a minute, you sold our house when you were going for the election. Now we have nowhere to sleep, or we have no rental sources anymore. What happens? Now, this anger is transferred towards your opponent who defeated you in an election. Or you participate in an election expecting a free and fair election, then election fraud comes in, violence follows through, and you lose without understanding exactly how you have lost the election. Now, these are the issues that cause psychological anguish. They cause intergroup tensions. They cause inter-party tensions, but also threaten national security. And when these things happen, businesses begin to fear. You don't invest where you are not certain. Some of the businesses would have also been compromised during elections. If you financed my election hoping that when I win, you get a contract, what happens? When I lose, I don't become district chairman or president. You are sure that your next 5 years
are secured. We always say secure the bag.
Secured or insecured, yes. Exactly. So these are the issues that we are really contending with, Tracy. Yes.
Well, that is very deep on all kinds of levels, but also the conversation around how then those grudges do influence or affect national unity and cohesion of Ugandans entirely. How bad, how dire is the situation?
Depending on the level of mistrust and suspicion that follows elections, the consequences on national unity and social cohesion can be serious. For example, after the 2006 elections, Besigye went into exile. You can be sure that the supporters of Besigye or the sympathizers of Besigye were uncomfortable that the doctor was in exile, while his opponents were here eating the national cake. In 2011, we had an inflationary spiral after the elections, which affected everyone's pocket, generally speaking. And in 2026, just a few months ago, after the elections, Bobi Wine went into exile. You can be sure that the supporters and sympathizers of Robert Kyagulanyi are saying, wait a minute, we don't see our leader, we are uncomfortable. I think even the sympathizers of Dr. Besigye were saying, our Kano is in prison. He should have participated in elections either by contesting or by campaigning for someone. They are uncomfortable. Now, what happens is that there would be sympathizers of either of these groups begin to see each other with mistrust and suspicion. You have always seen the election violence that characterizes NRM primaries in different parts of the country. Some of the tensions within the NRM in those countries create permanent rifts so that people don't want to meet eye to eye. Now, when you extend them to the national level elections where you have leaders like Robert Chaguranyi or Dr. Besigye, it becomes very problematic to bring together these people who have a disgruntlement over the management of elections or the general political governance to come to table and speak freely the way I'm speaking to you. But most importantly, the behavior of political leaders after the elections tends to create rifts among us. You would expect that after elections, the losers and the winners hug. Because this is what democracy means. Exactly. Democracy means that the losers and the winners should hug and accept the defeat or accept the responsibility
to be a leader for all.
To be a leader for all. But when you start saying, I don't accept these election outcomes, I don't associate with the verdict made by the Electoral Commission, it means that an election official is not safe wherever they are. It means that the supporters of your opponent are not safe when they are dealing with you. It also means that the business relationships you used to have with them have been disrupted.
Which brings me to that very question in terms of the business cost of these kinds of tensions. Long term, first we'll deal with them immediate in terms of that on the economic spectrum of a country that is looking to really grow into the higher middle income status. What are the immediate but also long-term consequences of these our actions?
One, these tensions scare investors, domestic and foreign. Domestic investors hoard their money, fearing to invest in certain areas where they think their money may not be safe. Others who have the access and the capacity will take out their money and invest in other countries, thereby cutting off employment opportunities for the would-be Ugandans that would be working in their investments. Foreign investors will not actually come. They will watch and see. Because of these tensions, the time value of money is lost. If a foreign investor would have invested 6 months ago and waits for another 6 months, it means we are losing 6 months of having the money in the economy and the value that it would be creating being present in the economy. Then in the long term, it means every delay is loss of time and productive capacity of the economy and also of the investor. This also means that the revenues that the government would be collecting from the investment and the employment opportunities and the consumption income of the employees are not collected. So government lacks money to provide roads.
And yet spent a lot during the election as
Yet
well.
the government has also spent a lot during elections. When you bring all these ones together, you get a lot of post-election financial distortions.
Doctor, just maybe to just take you back, we have quite a young population. As a country, that very population has either been exploited by political groups, political actors, especially within the election itself. And yet, the fallout from whatever tensions have been created by these, what you don't want to call them very selfish individuals, are not adequately met after the expectations of whoever was on that bandwagon is dropped immediately. How do we make sure the young people are aware to these realities, that in these moments sometimes they're just pawns?
Thank you very much. First of all, to say that it would be too diplomatic to say that politicians are not selfish. An unselfish politician would be an unusual one, and they have always been few in the world, and scattered in between. In one generation, you may get one in the whole world. Most politicians are selfish, whether they know it or not, or whether they agree with it or not. Two, it seems to be the fate of humanity that young people are always the worst victims. Young people, and especially women, are always the worst victims of political tensions. They are instruments who are also used in political tensions. They are also victims. Instruments because most times young people don't understand the level of selfishness of the politicians who are mobilizing them for especially conflicts. Victims because also they have the energy to be used. And you know, an old politician in his 50s may not be able to run on the streets throwing stones and sustain a 2-day strike, like a walk-to-work strike that we used to have. But young people have the energy, still have the energy. Because of limited understanding of the would-be costs as well as the instrumentalization that politicians are making on the youth, and also the energy that God still keeps in our bodies, we tend to go on the front lines. And we are the ones who die. Let me give you some basic data, and then we bring it down. My data shows me that the GDP per capita of Uganda in 1977, before the attack on Idi Amin, was $237.6.
Okay.
GDP per capita is the amount of money the average citizen earns in a whole year. 237 at current prices in US dollars. But guess what?
Today.
In 1982, this had reduced to 157. What had happened? The war against Amin, which was taking a toll on the young people, plus the post-1980 elections crisis and war, we are drawing the economy downwards. Let us move on. In 1987, when the current government was 1 year in office, the GDP per capita of Uganda was 393. What happens? In 2003, it was 250.
That was just after the 2001
just after the 2001 elections. When you compare again with 2010, it was 823. But you know what it was in 2017? 765.
Again.
You can see that those reductions are associated with election seasons.
Yes.
This means that part of what has been delaying our development, our ability to reach the middle income status, is the disruptive influence of elections on our politics, on our governance, and on our economy. Now, if we had peaceful elections, we would be suffering less and less of these challenges. But since 2001, we have had violence during elections. And this violence has had serious consequences on our trajectory of economic development.
Now, with this kind of data, which is available, by the way, you would expect that perhaps things would be done differently. But again, like you said, it's in the true nature of these disruptive events. Let's look at when transition or when reconciliation or when dialogue are words that are associated with sellouts.
Yes, yes.
That kind of situation or scenario being presented definitely has a weight affects again the economy. So my conversation is, what does the absence of reconciliation, dialogue, these conversations, what do they have in terms of their influence on public trust in institutions, but also in setting a very sustainable future for a country?
Before we talk about the cost of absence of reconciliation, maybe we should ask ourselves, what are the foundational issues? What are the conditions for reconciliatory post-election governance? Some of these things have deep constitutional and institutional implications. Our electoral system is such that if I get 51% of votes, I take the whole cake. You who has gotten 49, with all that follow you, you have zero cake. I think such an electoral system is counterproductive. Because you have a big following, You have 35%, for instance, of the following.
Sizable enough.
Sizable number. And then may I have 65 or 67. Then I run with the whole cake. You are left with nothing. I think the electoral system for Uganda, especially for heterogeneous Uganda, is counterproductive. This, in my opinion, requires that we relook at the constitution and ask ourselves, is this feasible for Uganda's development? So you would want an electoral system where if I get 30% of the mandate, then I get 30% of the governance responsibility. Either by having 30% of the cabinet positions, 30% of executive positions in local government, like that. So that you have a Julius Malema who is not on the streets, but in the cabinet. You have a Bobby Wine who is not in exile, but in parliament. And he brings his ideas, he brings his opinions, and they inform the legislative process. He consults his followers, they bring their views, and they challenge government policy and improve government policy. When you close out those who hold a significant percentage of the electoral mandate and political support, I think the winner-take-it-all politics that we practice from our electoral system is being counterproductive. So we need to reform our electoral system. Now, what happens when we don't do it? When we don't do it, you prolong apathy. People who think that they don't associate with the election outcome of 2006 and that they don't associate with the electoral outcome of 2011 and of 2016 or 2021, where do you think now they are? They are either quiet, writhing in pain, psychological pain and other forms of pain, or those who were arrested are in prisons or are nursing wounds of imprisonment or other forms of harassment, or those who would be taking part in politics have withdrawn. So you have a country that has unhealed wounds that carry on over the years and become what I would call perpetual disgruntlement in the political arena. In 2016, I called it political stagflation, where the political situation is, the political institutions are unable to contain the contending political forces that are potentially disruptive. So when you don't reconcile, you have prolongation of unreconciled wounds, and these wounds can burst out in any form. They can burst out in the form of a coup d'etat. They can burst out in the form of a civil insurrection, like you saw walk-to-work protests. They can burst out in the form of citizen withdrawal. You see the voter turnout dropping down, and for you are singing, we are a democracy, we hold regional elections, when actually people are not turning up to vote. They can turn out in the form of violence. This is why NRM, for instance, primaries are associated with a lot of election violence. And when you have these tensions, you are disrupting economic activity every time you hold elections. It also strengthens, it implants the arrogance and capacity of those with power to keep the other ones at bay. They will solicit support from the business community, secret support. They will solicit support from illicit sources to make sure that they consolidate their power and keep the other ones at bay. It also builds fear in those who are governing. Whenever they think of their opponents, they think of people who are coming to punch them. So the cartel. At the end of the day, the conversation, the would-be political conversation, is cut off. And sometimes this can end up into serious consequences like we see in Sudan today.
Now, you do speak of the situation and the looming doom if these are not in any way addressed. The question is there a way we can make this institutionalized? Is there a way we can make reconciliation institutionalized rather than leave it to ad hoc response teams during periods of elections?
At the theoretical level, yes. There are many ways. But in the case of Uganda, we have a few options. Number one is that the ruling NRM needs to clean its house. You cannot be a ruling party which has been in office for 40 years, and every election primaries, you have more violence than actually in general elections. It means intra-party democracy in the NRM is lacking. The second is to relook at the Constitution. I think our electoral system, the winner-take-it-all politics it produces is counterproductive. I would recommend amending the Constitution so that presentation system where those who lose but have some percentage are part of the governance to the extent of their percentage.
But then they argue that that's the opposition side in parliament.
You need the opposition in parliament because political opposition means alternative policy opinions. When you don't do that, you hasten incentives for non-constitutional political methods like coups and armed rebellions. The third is to make the cost of political violence unbearable. Some politicians participate in violence because of impunity. They will mobilize gangs, deploy them, and a few of you will be arrested and taken in prison. They forget you there, and then they get their day, and they know nothing happens to them. But if a competent court of law determined that you, Rwengabo, have mobilized people to participate in violence in your favor, and therefore, as a leader of this political camp or group, you are barred from participating in electoral politics in this country for the next 30 years. You will have every incentive to appeal to your people to be peaceful during elections. And if this were the case, constitutionally and legally, I think people would be behaving a bit more moderately. Yes.
The conversation in terms of when we talk about taking responsibility, sometimes, like you said, it's so easy to assume that perhaps the ruling regime or the winner who eventually took it on in terms of leadership should be the one leading the conversation in terms of reconciliation, dialogue, or should be taking charge. Is there some way that all forces, when it comes to this, take responsibility, equal responsibility? Is that a known mechanism? Can it work where you have, for example, the opposition or any other stakeholders lead the conversation, but also has that been tested, tried, and does it yield results? Or should it be the regime?
Fortunately or unfortunately, when you take political power in an organized society, whether you got it violently or fraudulently or peacefully, you have the responsibility to put things right. The opposition, for instance, a political party like DP, has no constitutional mandate in Uganda today to say, let us amend the constitution. They can only propose. It's the government, through the Ministry of Justice, through Parliament, that can do that. The opposition group like NUP does not have the coercive power to force anybody because it does not control the instruments of coercion, the police, the intelligence, and the military. Again, it's the government in office that has that. Now, when you are in office, you have that natural responsibility to say, wait a minute, these are Ugandans. These are our fellow Ugandans. Come and we talk. We have the National Consultative Forum for Political Parties, headquartered at the Electoral Commission. That would be one platform where the ruling party would invite colleagues in the opposition and say, what do we do about these things? I think the Inter-Party Organization for Dialogue, which was ad hoc previously, has now been legalized. Through the iPod, leaders of all political parties meet. It's like summit-level meeting. And they have a conversation. You need open, receptive conversation between the ruling NRM and the opposition parties under iPod to come up and say, as iPod, let us propose this to cabinet. Because we are political top dogs. All of us are potential presidents. They sit with President Museveni and say, we are proposing this to cabinet. Let us see what cabinet says. The president meets his fellow presidents from other political parties after 3 months and says, when we got into cabinet, the cabinet decided as follows. We are proceeding with parliament. If parliament passes this, then the situation will be like this. So that when you have conversed and you have agreed, the other parties see that the government is taking action on these fundamental issues. This is a sole responsibility of the government to make sure that it drives processes of openness, receptivity, and consideration of the opinions of the opposition leaders so that they inform reforms in governance. The other one, would be to support, strengthen, and facilitate especially youth structures, so that at every sub-county, at every parish, civic education targeting the youth is adequate to make sure that everyone understands the cost of political violence, the cost of crisis, the cost of national divisions, and other things. Presently, and over the past many years, youth structures are underfunded, under-supported, under-facilitated.
Well, very interesting conversations with Dr. Rwengabo. We will be taking a short break. This conversation continues right after this.